Hello, my name is Lynette Mariachi. I'm the coordinator of the Family Resource Center at the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. Thank you for joining us. Let's quickly talk statistics. It's commonly known that approximately 90% of deaf and hard of hearing children are from hearing families. In most occasions, these deaf children are the first deaf person their families have ever met. That was certainly the case for myself. I'm from a hearing family, and I was the first deaf person my parents had ever met. It is so very important for families with deaf and hard of hearing children to have the opportunity to connect with deaf individuals, no matter what their hearing status is, what their communication modalities are, and what their backgrounds consist of. It's important for families to be able to have the opportunity to listen and learn from deaf individuals. That is the purpose of this video. We want to give you the opportunity to listen and learn from the deaf adults that are participating in this panel. However, we want to emphasize that no deaf or hard of hearing individual is the same. Their hearing status, communication modality, background, and experiences are all different. Although the stories you will hear tonight may be similar to others' experiences, no individual story or experience is the same. We encourage you to continue to connect to deaf adults in any way you can, whether it's by attending deaf events in the community, once it's safe to do so, following deaf and hard of hearing individuals on social media, such as Instagram or Facebook, learning ASL, learning about deaf culture and deaf history, or attending more webinar events such as this one. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you to our panelists.
Hello, my name is Stephen Boyce. I'm deaf. I attended a school for the deaf in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I started at the Scranton State School for the Deaf in pre-K and was a student there until graduation. During high school, I took classes at a neighboring public school for half the day in addition to classes at the School for the Deaf. The public school was close by, which made it easy to attend both schools. After graduating high school, I went to RIT in Rochester, New York, where I graduated with 2 degrees. The first was an associate's degree in computer-aided drafting. Then I transferred to a bachelor's program, earning another degree in civil engineering. Currently, I work for PennDOT as a bridge inspector in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Hi, my name is Richie Bryant, and this is my name sign. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, where I attended a public school with an interpreter until graduation. Following that, I attended Gallaudet University and earned a bachelor's degree in American Sign Language. I continued on to McDaniel College, earning a master's degree in deaf education. I've worked in the realm of education with colleges and universities as well as the K through 12 setting for over 20 years. Presently, I work as a staff interpreter at Gallaudet University, where my job includes working with deaf-blind students, translating written English documents into ASL, and occasionally working in higher visibility role supporting communication for larger audiences. I also started my own business a year ago, an ASL business with a focus on providing trainings and workshops.
Hello, my name is Mayra Castro, and this is how you sign my name. I was born deaf into a hearing family. My family is originally from Cuba and came to the United States in the late 1960s. I'm currently the director of Camp Soul of the Deaf, which was founded in 2016. The mission of Camp Soul of the Deaf is to provide positive role models for deaf youth of color, giving them the opportunity to explore their identity. They do this through a variety of activities designed to develop their language, build leadership skills, and have social experiences with their deaf peers. Hi, my name is Terica, signed like this. I spent my entire childhood in a mainstream educational setting and did not experience a deaf school until later in life. When I graduated from high school, I went to community college for 3.5 years. When I completed my time in community college, I decided I wanted to transfer to Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. In 2013, I graduated with my degree in history and moved to Philadelphia. I've been living here for 7 years. Currently, I work as a case manager for a mental health organization based outside of Philadelphia. My position includes a lot of advocacy work and making sure that services are being provided in the community and that needs are being met.
My name is Christopher Niger. I want to thank the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, Lynette, and Amy for inviting me to be on this panel. I did not become hard of hearing until I was 9 years old. I was in Main Street up until the age of 13 years old and began to attend Model Secondary School for the Deaf in Washington, D.C. I continued my education by earning a BA in Communication from Rowan University, but continued my education by earning my MA in Corporate and Public Communication from Monmouth University. I currently work as a correspondence coordinator at Penn Medicine in Center City, Philadelphia. Since being employed by Penn Medicine, I utilized their tuition reimbursement program and went on to earn my Master's in Science in Healthcare Administration. I also currently am a member of my municipal town's Veterans and Disability Advisory Board.
1, 2, 3.
Can you share about the beginnings of your family's journey with your hearing identity?
My parents didn't find out I was deaf when I was born. When I was little, they would call my name to get my attention, but I didn't respond. It wasn't until my mom snuck up behind me and banged loud pots and pans, and I still didn't respond, that my parents decided it was time to see the audiologist. It was then my parents found out that I was deaf and had no idea what to do. Fortunately, that audiologist also worked at the Scranton State School for the Deaf. In talking to the audiologist, my parents received a lot of support, resources, and advice. Now knowing that I was deaf, my parents began to explore what would provide the best educational opportunity for me. The IU in Wilkes-Barre had a school in mind for me to attend, so my parents agreed to visit before I enrolled. Keep in mind that my parents were teachers. They knew what should be taught in a classroom. What they saw was a class heavily focused on the use of speech and spoken language with minimal instruction in academic content. Their take on the curriculum used was that sending me there would be a wasted education. My parents also visited the Scranton State School for the Deaf. They saw a fully accessible educational environment, ASL was used. There was plenty of social interaction. After visiting both schools, their decision was that the Scranton State School for the Deaf was a better fit than the school at the IU in Wilkes-Barre. At that point, though, the government became a barrier to sending me to school there. What was happening behind the scenes in the late 1980s was that the government was actually trying to close the Scranton State School for the Deaf. Not wanting to see the school closed, stakeholders, to include alumni, teachers, and students' parents, began to protest. In 1989, they even went to Harrisburg to fight to save the school. My dad was actually there at the Capitol building that day. I was 2 years old at the time, and he was holding me while he spoke in support of the school. Being 2, I tried to distract him the entire time, because the only thing that was interesting was the artwork on the dome. As for my personal story, I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, in a hearing family. The cause of my deafness is unknown. With my family all being hearing, we communicated in different ways, including home signs and speech. I attended preschool at the Collier Center for Communication Disorders. From kindergarten through about 4th grade, the class was composed of a group of deaf students and a teacher who signed. Looking back on the experience, one thing that stands out to me now is that there was an observation deck in the classroom. To give you a bit of background information on the Collier Center, they had a collaboration with the University of Texas, Dallas, and therefore strong ties to scientific research. As part of the collaboration, each classroom was outfitted with an observation deck, including a one-way mirror that allowed people to view the class in progress without us seeing them. It seemed like we were a part of some kind of lab or something. Definitely a unique school experience. After my time at the Collier Center, I went to an elementary school with a similar class including deaf peers and a teacher who would use sign language. I began joining a mainstream class with an interpreter in 6th grade before transitioning to middle school. And the rest was history.
My parents learned of my deafness when I was 2 years old. They were initially stunned and worried. They weren't sure how this would impact my education or what kind of future I would have. They decided I would attend the same school as my siblings, which was a public school not far from home, where I received a mainstream education. I started there when I was 5 years old and stayed for 2 years. My parents could see that my academics were declining rather than improving over that time. Out of concern, they were able to get information from the Board of Education about another option. I left the mainstream school and enrolled in a school which used an oral philosophy for education. It was the 1970s, so the philosophy gained a lot of support, and this school had a relatively large number of deaf students. Since their focus was on listening and speech, they banned the use of sign language. This was common for oral schools at that time. It was my parents' expectation that I would learn to be proficient in spoken language, and they didn't know anything about sign language back then. Although I spent a number of years at the school, I would not say that I felt successful in my time there. My parents also were working with what they had. They did not know I was deaf until I was 2. They were Spanish-speaking immigrants trying to do their best. But their resources were minimal, and their access in the U.S. was limited in many ways. They relied on the Board of Education, but rather than offering many options or resources, the oral philosophy of education for deaf children was well ingrained, so that was what was shared with my parents. The school itself created communication barriers for me as well. In the 1970s and 1980s, they were not providing interpreters, either ASL interpreters or trilingual interpreters, meaning interpreters fluent in ASL English and also Spanish. Without this, my parents did not really have access to the school or my education. The lack of communication between the school and my parents, however, meant that they didn't have full access to information about what was really happening for me at school. My parents struggled. My education suffered, and my communication with my parents was always a challenge. My parents trusted that this school was giving me a good education and my best chances for success. Without access, though, my parents really did not know what was going on for me at school. My parents are no longer together, so I asked each of them separately about their experiences and perspectives finding out about my hearing loss. My mom said, actually, no, I forgot. Let me share some more background information first. There's a story from when I was between 10 to 13 months old. I'd already lost my hearing, but it had not been discovered or diagnosed yet. My mom noticed that I didn't seem to be reacting to her, even though she was yelling loudly. When my grandmother got me, she took me straight to the pediatrician. That doctor took a look at me and had concerns right off the bat, so we went to see an ENT, a doctor who specialized in ear, nose, and throat for more testing. The tests confirmed what they thought, that I was deaf. First, my parents grieved. They never expected this, so it came to them as a shock. I am my mom's oldest child and my father's third child. My mom was 20 when she had me, so she really didn't know what to do when her first child, her first baby, was deaf. She was still so young herself. My dad was only 24. It was a double whammy for my mom, to be a new mom and have a deaf baby. She didn't know what to do. Luckily, my mom's mom stepped in. She got to work, doing research and reaching out. I love my grandmom. She made call after call after call until she finally found an agency called Georgia Pines. My mom got in touch with them and worked out a time for them to come to my parents' home. When they came, they had an interpreter and an EI teacher, and they talked about all kinds of things. My mom has since told me that they really empowered my parents to be in charge of my academic career and make the decision about what that would look like for me. So, my mom decided I would go to a mainstream school. She knew she wanted me to be prepared for the world, and she saw the world as full of hearing people, Going to a mainstream school, I could learn how to survive. I would be better able to develop strategies and learn to communicate as a deaf person in a hearing dominated society. These strategies and communication skills would help me get through life. So that was their decision, and I stayed in a mainstream setting the rest of my childhood. That was my mom's story. My dad is a bit different. For one, he wasn't involved in the same way as my mom and grandmom. I asked him about this, and he said it had a lot to do with grief. He wasn't ready for all that he might have to learn and be open to while he was dealing with the grief of having a deaf baby. Even though he had a hard time with it, he was also still really worried about me. He worried if I would be teased, bullied, or taken advantage of, and thought about that a lot. He had to deal with that and was not ready yet. He wasn't prepared to get really involved. He wasn't ready to be a part of the EI process or anything at that time.
Can you share about your beginnings of your family's journey with your hearing loss? I think of it as a confusing time because no one knows how to proceed or what steps should be taken. I do give my mother and father a lot of credit of being huge advocates for me, whether it was medical or educational. My parents noticed my hearing loss because I was sitting closer to the TV, and my teacher noticed I was ignoring classmates and my classmates would be on page 10 and I would still be on page 5. My parents put their care in the hands of doctors at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, who diagnosed me with otosclerosis. A surgical procedure was tried to restore my hearing, but it was not successful.
How did you communicate with your family and extended family members growing up? What were some of the challenges, if any?
I come from a hearing family, although my parents do sign. They don't use ASL exactly. It's more like total communication. But for the rest of the family, when I would communicate with my cousins, or aunts, or uncles, well, remember that I grew up in the 90s. Technology back then designed for accessibility with deaf people in mind was limited to simple things like captioning and TTYs to make calls through the relay. If I did need to communicate with my cousins or aunts or uncles, we would use paper and pen to write back and forth. I could call them and catch up using the TTY and going through the relay service. In the late 1990s, maybe early 2000s, email became more widespread. I liked that as a way to communicate with my cousins. We're all the same age, young and tech savvy, but my aunts and uncles don't use email. My dad and I even tried to set up a computer at their house for them, but they never ended up using it. I could still call them with a TTY through the relay service. My parents and siblings are all hearing. I'm the only deaf person in my family. The primary ways in which we communicate with each other are through either home signs, written English, or lip reading and speech. I've had the experience of what's known as dinner table syndrome. That's the feeling of being present at a meal with family members, but not being included in any of the conversation that's taking place, or feeling a part of family discussions. Clearly, that was a challenging experience to go through. And while using home signs for communication in the present moment was fine, it didn't afford me the opportunity to have a substantial conversation with my family. I wasn't able to discuss in detail how school was going or anything else that was happening in my life. A basic understanding of who I was could be conveyed. However, that didn't include being able to communicate my future goals and aspirations with my family. I wasn't able to have those types of meaningful conversations. My siblings have since gotten married and had children of their own. However, my relationship with my nieces and nephews is limited as a result of communication barriers. I would recommend all family members to have at least minimal sign language skills.
As for my communication with my family, it was influenced by our Cuban culture. Growing up in a Cuban American home, the culture of family was strong. We always spent time together as a family, with our cousins and extended family too. Every weekend, Saturdays, and often Sundays, we would have family gatherings with relatives from Brooklyn, Queens, and other parts of New York City. Most of what I learned was information I gained from taking in my surroundings. I paid attention to what they were wearing or eating, saw that my family would often play dominoes, and picked up on anything else that I could on my own just by looking. This did not mean that I actually understood anything about Cuban culture, or that I had a sense of shared belonging in that culture either. I didn't have much of a sense about where I belonged in general. At school, my classmates were almost all white. I didn't see many other students who looked like me, and no staff who looked like me either. Today, I really see the value in encouraging the hiring of adults who are BIPOC. This is so important for kids to have role models that not only they can look up to, but also identify with. I think if there had been a teacher in my school from Colombia, for example, that would have been someone I felt connected to and felt a shared culture with. That would have helped inform my own sense of identity and belonging. I understand that schools are governed by politics and have to adhere to guidelines for curriculum. I think there is so much value in making room for teachers to share parts of themselves and give students a place to feel seen and connected. Without that shared culture, students like me can end up feeling lost. I didn't have a sense of shared identity at school. I wasn't sure how to fit in with my culture of my family at home, so that was hard for me. I did have siblings as well. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. My oldest brother would sometimes try and help with communication. My sister didn't really do that very much, and then my brother closest to me in age spent a lot of time functioning as my interpreter and letting me know what information I was missing with my parents. Without that, they mostly relied on gesturing to communicate. There was a lot of gesture-based communication at home. I did share a sign language book with my mom to try and help her learn. The book even included Spanish along with the signs, but it was still a challenge. Unfortunately, she didn't really take to the book and never used it much. Even now, years later, most of my communication with my mom is through gesture. What has worked best for us in recent years is the availability of a Spanish interpreter through a video relay service, or VRS. This has allowed my mother and I to have direct conversations through an interpreter with far less miscommunication and misunderstanding. At this moment, this is our best option for communication. My parents, cousin, sister, and godmom could all sign, but that was it. No one else in my family ever learned ASL to be able to sign really well. Maybe they knew a little, but that's all. My maternal grandparents actually became pretty good at signing too. The problem, though, was that they had health issues, which made signing hard for them. They decided, well, it was not really a decision, but they couldn't sign. They both had arthritis, and my grandmother also had multiple sclerosis, which impacted her nervous system. So neither of them could sign with me. They did try, and we made do. What ended up happening was that we created a lot of gestures that had meaning to my family, but weren't really ASL. Things like blanket or food were communicated, by making whatever gestures we could to try and understand each other. It was harder when my mom wasn't around, and then the three of us had to work really hard to try and communicate. Also, my granddaddy worked to try and communicate with me another way too. He's since passed away, but we had a special connection. A lot of the time we would write back and forth. Oddly enough, this probably helped improve my reading and writing skills in English. We would pass a note back and forth to each other to communicate, and I would try to figure out how to read his lips, too. If I had some context or knew what he was talking about, then I could try to catch what he was saying. Now, family events were something else. I dreaded going to things when the whole family was getting together. I knew I'd be in a group of people and not know who anyone was and know that they would not be able to sign with me. I wanted to know my family and understand the family history, so I was always trying to get as much as I could from my mom. I would ask her to tell me who was who, which people were there, what people's names and relations were. She would fill me in and answer my questions. That didn't stop people from trying to talk to me, though. Someone would come up and say something like, "I remember when you were a baby," and that's where the conversation would end because they wouldn't understand anything I signed in response. Sometimes I would ask my mom to join a conversation and help us talk or sign something, and she would tell them what I said. Really ended up being a pretty awkward and uncomfortable situation for me. But what other choice did I have?
How do you communicate with your family and extended members growing up? What were some of the challenges, if any? I communicated orally and still communicate orally, mainly with others. However, there are difficulties and there will always be challenges. The biggest problem I face is people do not think I have a hearing loss because I speak well, or people get frustrated when I ask them to repeat things. During this, it usually comes with a moment of, it's not me, it's them. I feel I should never have to apologize for asking for clarification. You must be your own advocate.
We often hear about deaf individuals struggling with their identity as an adolescent. Parents with deaf and hard of hearing children often ask this question: how can they support their child as they get older? What can you share about your experience?
I didn't struggle to find my identity growing up. No, not really. I attribute that to my parents doing their best to find the resources necessary for me to be successful. Although, I have to admit, sometimes I wished I was hearing. I'm from a hearing family, but I am happy with my identity. I've learned a lot about deaf culture, history, and deaf culture worldwide. It's all fascinating, so yeah, I'm proud to be deaf. When I was a teenager in high school, we were in mainstream school. In class during the day, I would spend time with my friends. The school was on par with the school for the deaf as far as extracurricular activities were concerned. There was a junior NAD, a variety of after-school programs and activities, and a late bus to take everyone home once they were done. Without meaningful communication at home, I was always involved at school. When I got my driver's license at 16, I was able to drive to school. That meant that sometimes after school, I was able to go out with friends, doing something like going to a restaurant to get something to eat. Or, on the weekends, there were football games that we'd go watch. Our school had a pep club, which is similar to cheerleading, and there were deaf cheerleaders too. So we'd go to the game to support them. There were many things to do. It was a rich high school experience.
As I shared before, the primary culture I was exposed to at home was Hispanic and Cuban culture. Although I associated that culture with my family, I wasn't sure what part felt important to me. I did not bring the culture I saw at home to school with me. Between home and school, I was left feeling pretty confused. My own identity was still very much emerging, and I didn't know who I was yet. I wasn't even sure if I felt like I identified as hard of hearing, or deaf, or something else. So without an identity to claim, I didn't have a clear sense of pride either. After I graduated high school, I attended the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, NTID, in Rochester, New York. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by students who went to a deaf school. I was being exposed to deaf culture, and that was both a profound experience and also a very real culture shock. I withdrew from NTID when my father passed away and focused my attention on taking care of my mother. In 1992, I went back to college, but I decided to go to Gallaudet University and study psychology. It took me until then, until being at Gallaudet, to really think about who I was. I was able to explore what identity meant to me and became proud of my Cuban heritage and claimed that as part of my identity, but also my identity as a deaf person. I had opportunities to interact with so many different people, and through figuring out that, I was proud to be who I was. It changed me. It made me a better person. I became heavily involved in campus and community activities. In my adolescence, without any strong sense of identity, I wasn't really grounded. At school, I was around mostly white people, and I saw the expectations I was supposed to fulfill there. Then at home, my Cuban family had a different set of norms and expectations. I was floating somewhere in between and had a really hard time understanding who I was. If you remember from my earlier videos, I talked about how my dad was not involved when I was young. There were periods where he was around more and periods where he was around less, in part because of his grieving process and also other things he just had going on. But for pretty much all of my elementary years, he wasn't there. He came back into my life when I was 12. My mom and I were going through our own stuff at that time. We had some mother-daughter issues and didn't get along. I wasn't listening to my mom. We weren't able to really share and talk to each other. While we weren't getting along, my dad got involved again. So my dad became a part of my life again when I was 12 years old. It was a weird time. It was interesting. My mom and I were always at it. My dad, who had been gone, was now back around. All of a sudden, I had to pretty much rebuild my relationship with my father. I wasn't angry, but it was a lot for me. It was a transition time. I was already going through the transition from elementary school to middle school. I was meeting a lot of new people, including more deaf people. So all of it made for a big adjustment period for me. My self-esteem also went through a lot. For the most part, I had pretty good self-esteem. But there was one time, one kid, he destroyed any self-esteem I had at the time. It was hard being 12, 13, 14 years old. People say you should just get over things. Maybe it could have been just a little comment or something to let roll off my back, but instead it really messed me up. At that age, I had acne, my body was changing, it was an awkward age, puberty hit, plus managing self-esteem too. Looking back, I still think that middle school was a really tough time. I also didn't have a clear sense of what it meant to have a deaf identity. Of course, I knew I was deaf, so it was a part of me, but not something I felt I owned or felt confident about claiming. I identified much more strongly with being Black. I was in a school with lots of other Black kids, even though the school had a mix of other students, so I felt that sense of Black identity, but not deaf identity. My first real exposure to deaf culture was at a deaf camp. It was a culture shock for me. This basketball camp with all these deaf kids, these white deaf kids, was so new for me, and I loved it. I didn't know what I was even missing before that. I felt like I finally found a part of me. I was done with hearing people. Well, not like that, don't get me wrong. I love my family, but this was so new for me, and I was all in. I couldn't get rid of my mom fast enough. I kicked her out of the camp so I could be with my people, the deaf community. It was an important experience for me. I loved it. That was the beginning of my journey, developing my sense of myself as a deaf person, gaining more confidence about that part of myself. By the time I got to Gallaudet, it was on. I was deaf, I knew what that meant to me, and it felt good. Going back to my dad, he was a preacher. He spent a lot of time at the library, reading and writing and preparing his sermons. Often he would bring me with him to the library while he worked. I don't remember this story, but my dad has shared it with me. One day, as he tells it, he was reading one of my papers and saw that my writing was not grammatically correct and didn't sound like how a hearing person would write. He wasn't having it. That was unacceptable. So, he started teaching me himself. He taught me English grammar, structure, parts of speech, and all the other things my mainstream education had apparently missed. I also don't blame mainstream educators, though. Their training does not include the methods and knowledge to be prepared to teach English to deaf children. They aren't trained for that. I get it. It also meant that from then on, my dad took on the role of being my English teacher.
We often hear about deaf individuals struggling with their identity as an adolescent. Parents with deaf, hard of hearing children often ask this question: how can they support their child as they get older? What can you share about your experience as a teen? This is an interesting question because during my time in MSSD, I would go through the am I deaf or hard of hearing? To this day, I straddle the fence of the hearing world and the deaf and hard of hearing world. I think that is my choice because I don't want to let go of either culture. After all, both are immensely important to me and my identity. The advice I would give is to listen. No problem will be solved without listening and exchanging communication. If this is a barrier, then this needs to be solved first. Listening is so important to learn how they feel, what they are going through, and what support, if any, is needed. I also recommend learning about a particular issue if they are enduring something. The teenage years are the hardest anyone will go through, and even when you make it through them, your hearing loss will still be with you. I think the best thing is to be happy in your skin and learn how to cope, and not be ashamed to seek counseling for help with any transitions or difficulties. Mental health is so important.
The success of a child is dependent upon the parental and family dynamics. The more parents are involved with the deaf child's life, can communicate with them, support their journey as a deaf person, that provides them with the opportunity to flourish. Research has shown Parental involvement is the key to determining the success of the child. Research has also shown that when parents can use ASL, not necessarily fluently, but possess the ability to communicate using ASL, will help develop a strong language foundation for their child. That goes back again to the importance of communication for you and your family as well. You want the deaf child to be able to develop relationships with their siblings, because those sibling relationships are one of the most powerful tools, most powerful influences in the development of the child's language and social skills. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would ask my mother to put my siblings in sign language classes. Using home signs just didn't cut it for anything more than short, simple communication. At the same time, I do acknowledge that my mom was a single mother. As the breadwinner in the household, she worked tirelessly around the clock to make ends meet. So it is important to recognize that as a single mother, she needed support too. There's a well-known quote that says, "It takes a village to raise a child," and there are many ways to do just that. We need to have siblings involved in communicating with the deaf child. Bring in deaf role models. Find babysitters who know ASL. Work with deaf families, or find different avenues to have the deaf child involved in communication. Attend deaf events at least 2 to 3 times a year. Most of all, get to know your deaf child. Learn about their hopes, their dreams, their desires, because that will lead to a meaningful, honest relationship with your deaf child, just as you would a hearing child.
When I'm talking to parents, I always say that your best resource is your child's school. It's integral to your participation that you have full access and inclusion to what's happening in your child's education. You and your child's teacher should be sharing information regularly. You have to work together. The success of your child, their future opportunities, and their prospects of going to college depends on your ability to be informed about and included in your child's education. My final note is about the importance of being involved with cultural-based organizations. There are nonprofit organizations available for you and your child to hear from deaf adults who are also Asian, Hispanic, and Black. Attend their events, listen to their perspectives, expose your child to as many experiences as you can. Give your child the opportunity to form relationships with deaf adults from similar backgrounds who can serve as role models and support networks. I strongly recommend finding ways for you and your child to participate in these organizations. That sums up the highlights of my childhood, family, education, and background, and also some key resources available for parents. The first point I want you to take away from this is that language deprivation is real. That not only results in an impact on that child's language development, but it has a significant impact on their identity development as well. Second, I want to emphasize the importance of intersectionality. This is so important to BIPOC deaf folks. BIPOC meaning Black, Indigenous, and people of color. This encapsulates people who are Asian or from India, Somalia, Malaysia, or other identities that connect with this term. Intersectionality is important for deaf BIPOC children. To all the families, please share your family's culture with your deaf child. Teach them about your customs, your traditions, and food. If you speak another language in your home like Spanish, share that with your deaf child too. If you even use another sign language at home other than ASL, then use that with your child so they are encouraged to learn that too. Teach your deaf child whatever is important to you in your culture, your language. Give that to them. Share that with them so they don't miss out and end up deprived of that opportunity and knowledge. Your child may surprise you with all that they learn and ways that they take on a shared cultural identity with you. Third, support your child, period. Their hopes, their dreams, what they want for their life. Support them. This doesn't mean you can't still talk to your child about the realities of the world, but in the end, let them know they are supported. They will face autism and ableism because those are very real. But don't let that overshadow your support of them as a deaf person. Fourth, I encourage you to be transparent with your child. Share things with them. Maybe you aren't able to learn sign language for any number of reasons. Maybe you try and are only able to get so far. Whatever ASL you do have, use it. But don't let that limit your communication with your child. Find other ways to communicate, to get through to them, to understand each other, and be able to share openly with your deaf child and deaf family. Sometimes this transparency means recognizing when there is something about their experience as a deaf person that you will never understand. You are not deaf, so you don't think like a deaf person. Your lens is from a hearing person's perspective, and sometimes that may be a very different worldview. It's important to acknowledge that and support where they are coming from. Support them, listen to them, and validate their experiences as a deaf person. This process of staying open with your child and being transparent with them will go a long way with helping you to develop communication skills in your relationship with them as well. Find deaf peers for your child. Find opportunities for your child to meet, play with, socialize, and get to know other deaf children their age if you can. Anytime you hear about an event happening in the deaf community, be there and bring your child. Make connections with deaf adults who can be a positive role model for your child. Maybe this means building a network, seeking out resources, connecting with agencies, or something else. Whatever you need to do to expand your child's deaf community. I come from a social justice perspective, a framework of thinking about how to be transformative in our community and how to think in a community-based way. There are resources available to you if you take advantage of them. If you come across someone your child would benefit from meeting, then connect with them and let your child get to know those deaf adults. It's not just for your child. You need that community to support you too. You may have family, and that is great, but community support will be so important for you. You don't have to be learning and going through this alone. Lastly, let your child be themselves. Let your child come into their own understanding of their identity and who they are. You may be filling in gaps where their formal education misses things. Help them build up their self-esteem and feel good about themselves. These are my dreams for what I want for each of your children and for all future generations, especially our next generation of deaf BIPOC children. Thank you.